Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the second edition of the AWR SE Young Turks session. We are going to be having a series of lectures spread out over the course of a few weeks that will discuss topics that are relevant to the early career surgeon. I'm Ahem Arora, and today's speaker is Dr. Vinayak Rengan, who you also have on your screen with me right now. Uh, Vinayak, apart from being a surgeon, is also a young entrepreneur and someone who I've had the opportunity of learning a lot about business from over the past few months. Vinayak started off with a colleague, the Search Test app, something a lot of the postgraduates on our group are very familiar with. It's an app and information center for people who are preparing for subspecialty entrance in our country. Search Test was also the base app used on the inaugural AWRSE quiz, which was held last month and was a lot of fun setting up and giving. So, apart from his entrepreneurial skills, Vinayak also is a full-time surgeon. And despite me titillating and teasing everyone on WhatsApp messages about can you have a career in surgery without surgery, let me not take anything away from Vinayak. Vinayak is joining his MCH in pediatric surgery at SMS Jaipur. He's reported and he's going to be joining there in just a few days. So I was very interested in Vinayak's story personally because we don't have a lot of entrepreneurial spirit in the surgical fraternity. Would you say that's right, Vinayak?
Oh, absolutely. I tend to agree. I mean, we are kind of quite held up with our own jobs, and it takes a lot of time, money, and also energy. So I don't blame surgeons for not having an entrepreneurial spirit. Apart from the conventional starting a hospital and other sort of things.
Starting a hospital is also not everyone's cup of tea, man.
Oh, not at all.
It's going to be really interesting hearing from Vinayak as to how you can have a surgery related career that does not necessarily involve surgery. It's also going to involve picking up tips about how to generate a passive income stream. I've been educating myself about financials for the past year, and I think that's essentially what has happened here, right? You have a business model that is going to continue and gives you another revenue stream that sets you up for a decent amount of time, I would think.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, right now that we're doing pretty well, the amount of time investment I need to make on a daily basis is reduced considerably, and it gives me a very comfortable income apart from my surgical work. So
That's perfect. So I can't wait to hear about your entire journey right from you. So the screen's all yours, my friend.
just a second. Oh, where do I present? Explore. Where do I? Just a second. Yeah. Yeah. So.
Could you just get rid of the download bar at the bottom?
Huh. Fine.
Perfect. Looks good. All yours.
So okay. So as you all know, some of you might have heard of Search Test, and some of you might have used the app. But so when Ahem gave me the topic, a surgical career without a scalpel, I was a bit unknown because I didn't want to project myself as a surgeon who doesn't operate. So, and the topic itself is quite an interesting one. There are a lot of us love using the scalpel, the wielding it, showing off our tricks, showing off our knowledge, showing off our skills. But we all need to know that we can build a career in surgery other than just operating. So what kind of a career am I talking about? So the guy you see on the screen is Ramesh Krishnan. So Ramesh Krishnan was the non-playing captain of the Indian tennis team in Davis Cup for a very long time. So basically, am I talking about something like a guide who mentors people into surgery but actually doesn't operate himself? You know, we see some of these aging old people in some of the old charitable hospitals in India, and some of these old debaki types who say that they go into theater till they're 93. Am I talking about that? No, because first, I'm not that old. I'm just about a few years less than 30. And am I talking about an academic career, becoming a total professor? No. I mean, no medical college would hire me as a professor. They would hire me as an assistant professor maximum. Or am I talking about a career not using a fine 11 blade or a 15 blade, instead using a large blade, a butcher? No. So it's going to be completely different. The career I am talking about is building an app, getting into the technology aspect of surgery, getting into the technology aspect of surgical education. So this is the app I built with my friend. My friend is Gopi. He's also a surgeon, and incidentally, he's also joining his super specialty training in GI surgery this year. So we were classmates since undergrad days, and we were preparing for our MS exams, MS final exams also together. And that's when we realized that over a lot of cups of tea and other unnamed beverages, that there was a big deficiency in the super specialty training sector. There were certain established apps. They were low on quality, extremely low on content. There were a lot of errors. They were massively overpriced, and people were left with no option but to use them because they had been there for 10, 15 years. And everyone who had got a rank had to use them because there was no other option. Whether they got into the super specialty because of the training, because of that particular app, nobody knows. But that was the only app they had, and you could see marketing advertisements of a few centers which were pretty established. So at that point of time, I finished my MS. I was working in Delhi with Professor J.D. Sharma. And that's when in the same hospital, I met a surgeon who had discontinued his residency in the US due to some personal reason. And he was joining joining in the NHS after completing his MRCs. So at that point of time, I was already training people for MRCS as casually. I was training my friends. I had finished my MRCS Part A and Part B during residency. And so I used to spend a lot of time training juniors, training friends, and even seniors with their MRCS preparation. So this guy had a ready-made complete set of notes, which is pretty interesting. And so I thought, chalo, why don't we have a class with this MRCS Part B? And so the MRCS Part B course 2019 happened in Chennai. We took a small hall in a small hospital. We didn't have much expenses. I had to pay the guy who created the course content. He was Shan Alam. He's back to US right now, working at Mount Sinai. And the best thing was that we had 20 participants from 4 different countries: India, Sri Lanka, Nepal, and Bangladesh. The first course we had broken even. We had participants from 4 different countries. We also managed to release our own books. This is a search test MRCS Part B material, examination procedures, history, communication. So Shanalam, Vinay, that's me, and Gopi releases this thing. So this was the first class. That's me taking the class over there. It was quite a successful class. We had a professor of neurosurgery coming and even a few MS postgraduates. So the spectrum was quite varied, extremely varied backgrounds. But I'm really happy to say that all of them did pretty well in their exams and all of them passed. We started the first courses which were focused on communication and history taking for MRCS Part B. So we started building our funds with that. So the initial investment in this course got us some funds, which we decided to build it into an app. So this is our journey. In November 2019, the first MRCS Part B course was launched. February 2019, the search test app with general surgery question was launched. In April 2020 and May, we held our first live course. The first live course was a huge challenge. It was a huge challenge because that was when the lockdown had just started and people were not used to the concept of webinars, Zoom Live, and platforms such as AWRSC, Learning Journal, so they played a major role in allowing people to understand that the online courses are as good as the live ones. And that's when enrollment started tickling. And we made a decent amount of profit. We were able to pay off our faculty, which we thought was quite impossible. We then launched our GI and oncosurgery question banks. July 2020, we launched the gynec oncology question bank. And in September 2020, a NEET super specialty, we had multiple top ranks. And our partnership with AWRC has been quite successful. And we had our AWRC quiz in October 2020. So this presentation, I'm not going to talk about how successful our app was. Yes, we are now the market leader. We are the numero uno. We have about 4,000 people using our app right now. And we tend to invest a lot of time, money, and effort in improving our app on a daily basis. Yes, it is lonely at the top. There is a lot of jealousy. There is a lot of bickering. People who have friends earlier, when they see that you are becoming successful, they tend to ignore you. But yes, even if it's lonely, the view at the top is quite good. So what makes us unique? So we are young. Most of the population which is writing the exams is young. So I'm pretty sure that in the next 4 years, we are going to become irrelevant unless we try to hire in young blood. the fact that we performed better than our competitors was the fact that we were at least 15 years younger than the people who own the competitor apps. We had an intense emphasis on technology. We actually have a surgical app that works. And trust me, that's actually rare. Most of the people in the industry, they use apps which are built off shelves. Like they are shelf-made apps where you can make some minimal adjustment. We invested a lot of money in building our own custom app, and we have strict quality control programs. Every aspect of our app is tested, retested, and again tested, scrutinized by me, Gopi, and the entire team. We have an extremely responsive communication system, WhatsApp and email, and our question banks are very well researched and our videos are good. So this is a part of a website. This is how our app looks. So these are the questions on the app look. The user interface, we have spent a lot of effort doing this, making this. The questions are well researched. Every question has a reference and we don't slack. We have an extremely committed team of volunteers, interns, people working on a salary, and they all make a huge effort in making this app successful. So how we make it work? So this entire presentation is going to be about how to start such a thing and how to make it work. So we have a very small team. It's Gopi, me, and Suprabha, who joined us later. Suprabha is not a doctor. She's a linguist and she adds a lot of value to our team. So we are all friends first. We make sure that we meet often. We share food, we share drinks, and we have an excellent team dynamics. There's extremely open lines of communication. And trust me, we are not trying to be politically correct at all. If I don't like something, I say it. If she doesn't like something, we say it. And the fact that we are friends makes things easier at the end of the day, because you know that what I said actually is for the organization. It doesn't make an impact on our relationship. So this is if somebody can recognize, this is the Chicago Bulls team of the 90s, and that's Michael Jordan. Some of you might have seen the series Last Dance. This has been rated as the most successful team in NBA history for those who follow NBA. That's Michael Jordan, and that's his lieutenant Scottie Pippen. And what actually made this team work? Were they an exceptional group of individuals? Other than Michael Jordan, nobody else was exceptionally talented. What they had was a very high level of motivation and extremely well-honed sense of team spirit. They functioned as a team, and that is something which is very important. So handling team dynamics. So who are the three? Me, Gopi, and Suprabha. Plus, we have a lot more partners, and we have our own oncologist, resident oncologist, Vineet Nakra, who keeps guiding us. Vineet is also a good friend. So this is how our meets look. That's me, Suprabha, and Gopi, my wife, and a couple of friends who do help us on a regular basis, who partner with us. That's at Madras Social. The fact that we socialize quite often, even during times of Corona, I know it's risky, has created quite a sense of bonding between us. So we work on something called as a partnership model. So we do not ask extremely qualified, overqualified, super specialist trained people to create questions for us. The person who creates questions for us is the person who is preparing for the exam. We make sure that he has all resources at his hand. If he needs a book, that company gets it for him. If he needs some other help on a personal capacity, the team makes sure that he's taken care of like a family. The team search desk takes care of editing, marketing, and promotions. And the partner gets a significant percentage of the income. They don't get a fixed fee. This makes sure that there's an extremely good commitment from the student partner. So when money is involved, there is always the issue of team dynamics taking a natural hit. So the most important thing is to keep the lines of communication open. Work should be demarcated clearly. Clarify who takes credit for what. So the person who does this work gets credit, and the work flow should be clearly defined. So when I have some work pending, I don't ask anyone else to do, because that is my work. And the most important thing when money is involved is make sure payments are always on time. Every member of the team must be made to feel important. But the toughest task is getting rid of non-performing assets. There are going to be people in your team who do not match your dynamics, who are not as involved as you are, who may not be able to put the same effort. So that is the toughest part of running such a team. And I feel that I do fail in this because I'm unable to tell people that they are not doing a good job. I'm making efforts. I'm learning from people. I'm learning from Dr. Ramana, the way he is tough on people with him. So that is something which we are trying to improve. So the concept of sharing wealth, when you run such an organization, it's very important to share your wealth. Sharing enforces the fact that we are creating stakeholders, not employees. We have to understand the fact that employees do not work for the organization. Employees work for themselves. But stakeholders, if they own the company, they are going to work extremely hard because it is their company, it is their baby. And surgeons run unsuccessful organizations, unsuccessful educational apps because they feel that they are gods. They are unwilling to share profits, unwilling to share credit with people who are not doctors. We have to understand that certain things, certain aspects of the entire technology can be better handled by someone else with a um, better experience or a better set of knowledge skills. The most important aspect of running an app is to have a wide portfolio. Education is a volatile area. Rules change every day. NB creates new exams, new guidelines. So it's very important to have a wide portfolio. We are concentrating on NEET super specialty. We also do MRCS. We are going to enter into AppSci territory for US. So the fact that we have a very wide portfolio means that our risk is less. But when we have a wide portfolio, we also risk lack of excellence. So it is very important to maintain a balance between a wide portfolio and maintaining focus. As I already said, very difficult to get rid of non-performing assets. So it's better to get it right the first time, hire the best people. It is very important to find people with work ethic and motivation. And sometimes you get exceptional results. So this is Dr. Aishwarya. Aishwarya is a good friend. One fine evening, she decided to call me and said, Vinayak, can we make the NEET super specialty gynec oncology question bank? I said, yes, why not? Because I knew Aishwarya was a very motivated person. She created the question bank, she marketed it. The same year, she got ranked #1 in the NEET super specialty. So we guys, me and Gopi, spent a lot of time editing during the lockdown when there was no surgical work. We spent a lot of time editing the questions, creating questions, answering doubts. Without any sort of exceptional effort, we got exceptional results. Gopi got ranked 73 in GI surgery, and I got ranked 32 in pediatric surgery. We both are joining super specialty training in the next few days. So now comes the question. When you want to make such an app, how do you start? So the fact is that you have to identify the need. Identify where there's a deficit. Concentrate on areas of examinations or areas of education where there is a less number of players. Ask yourself what you can do better at every step. Example, you look at app A, you have a complete look at it. Ask yourself why you can do a better job. Every aspect, right from the download button, right from the images to the user interface, communications. Ask what you can do better, and that's the most important step of starting such an app. And a very important takeaway point is that don't rush in just because someone else is successful. SearchTest has spawned a lot of competitors, and I think that imitation is the best form of appreciation. And but people do have to realize that an extreme amount of motivation and commitment is needed to have such an app. Just because someone else is successful, don't rush in. Do your research properly. So this is the most telling image of this presentation. Ahem and I have quite some disagreements regarding this. Ahem has this policy where he says yes to everything. But I'm a bit conservative. I think in surgery and in such areas, I have this feeling that you should not bite more than what you can chew. Look at this guy. This guy is huge, but this burger is way beyond what he can bite. And when we bite more than what we can chew, we always risk losing focus. We always risk losing excellence. So never rush into launches. For example, our urology question bank was ready 4 months ago. It took us 3 full months to do the English checks, do the quality checks, spell checks, and always do remember good English is very, very important. Good English means that you cater to an international audience. You also create a sense of quality. When you start reading a textbook with a lot of spelling mistake, you are distracted. You feel that this is substandard and this is not something you should be paying for. A very important challenge when we run such an app is the art of time management. I have to tell you that I'm a full-time surgeon. I do assist quite a few surgeons in Chennai, and I'm also joining my residency. So the time allocation becomes a major struggle. It takes away a lot of time from your family. It also means that you need to steal a lot of time. You need to cut down on your time entertainment and time wasters. So it was quite a struggle for me at the start, but I realized that I had to cut my time wasters. I stopped spending too much time on Facebook. I stopped Netflix. I stopped Amazon Prime. Then I realized that I had enough time to spend with my family. I mean, my family might disagree, but yes, and also concentrate on search tests as well as surgery. So there's a very telling cartoon where the mom comes home and says that I forgot I had children. The another very important aspect when starting such an app is to learn the laws. The amount of taxation and the amount of laws regarding starting an app are simply humongous, and it takes a whole lifetime to learn all these things. It took me a lot of time, and it took me a lot of money because I ended up paying a lot of fines for the GST and all because I did not realize what I should be doing. So make sure that you get a good auditor and a good lawyer before you embark on something like this. What are the daily challenges you would face when you start something like this? Marketing is a daily challenge. The market is very competitive. So you should be learning search engine optimization, how to customize your Facebook ads, all those sort of stuff. Communications is an issue. Language is a major issue. After starting this app, I realized that there are a lot of surgeons in this country who do not prefer talking in English. And as my app is predominantly based out of Chennai, my entire team, except for perhaps me, nobody knows Hindi. And this is a major challenge which I'm facing right now. And we are looking to create a communications team which speaks at least English, Hindi, and a few southern languages. The other issue is handling egos. We are dealing with a lot of surgeons. We are dealing with a lot of gynecologists, and some of them are practicing. Some of them are earning quite a bit of money. And I'm very sorry to say, and I'm very ashamed to say that a lot of surgeons have huge egos. They tend to shout at you. They tend to abuse you. And especially if they realize that the person talking to them is not a doctor, they tend to be extremely rude. And this is something which I have learned how to handle since I've started search. So my philosophy is that if someone is rude to me, I'm not going to be ignoring him. I'm going to take his money and make him pay for my app. So that's the way I handle egos. So when I have that objective in my mind, I automatically become polite. So what you actually need when starting a lot of app is a lot of motivation. You need to do your research, but you also need to stop yourself from researching extensively. Because the fact is, if I had known that this entire journey was so tough, I would never have embarked on it. So the most important thing is that you need a lot of motivation. And of course, the entire team is a group of friends. We enjoy doing what we are doing. We enjoy the adulation that comes with it. We enjoy the happiness on our students' faces when they call us, they do video calls with us saying that they have got great ranks. We enjoy the fact that we are helping build careers. And we also enjoy the fact that we are providing something which makes people achieve their targets, achieve their goals, and makes them happy. Over to you, Am. Hello.
That was a great presentation, my friend.
Yeah, Am. Tell me. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to ask you something off topic, and I promise it will lead somewhere. How was your time with Dr. G.D. Sharma in Delhi?
Okay. So Dr. G.D. Sharma is a perfectionist. And Dr. G.D. Sharma places an extreme amount of emphasis on teaching. So I did my residency in a government college, Madras Medical College. I had some extremely great teachers. I had a great amount of surgical experience as a resident, doing laparotomies, splenectomies, doing open cholecystectomies, much more than what many residents in India can actually claim to. But GD Sharma made me feel quite inferior because he told me what are the mistakes I'm making.
Good teachers tend to do that.
Oh yeah. They pull down your they reduce your ego to rubbles. In fact, sir is pretty pissed off at me that I'm doing this interview just before I'm joining residency. He says keep your profile low right now. So sir has been quite a great motivator, and he has created, because this idea was formed when I was working with him, because he taught me how teaching should be done, and he taught me how to be a good general surgeon. And that is the reason I actually went. I got my specialty. In fact, even the year before I joined Dr. GD Sharma, I got in my. I had an MCH seat in hand, but I didn't want to join because I had this feeling that there was something wrong with me. I was not good enough as others thought I was. So that feeling made me go towards it. I also realized the fact that supervised cutting is very important. So Delhi has this culture where, I don't know in other parts of the country, Delhi has this culture where there are an amount of free cases, the dark cases, the Arogya Kosh cases, the EWS cases as they call them, which in which the residents are allowed to operate quite unsupervised. The consultants scrub in for the paid cases. Dr. GD Sharma had a very different aspect thinking. He said that if you are qualified enough to do this surgery, if I feel that you're doing this surgery well, you operate even on a paid patient. And if I feel that you don't know how to do this surgery, you don't even dare to touch the EWS patient. So he would make sure that he scrubs in for all the EWS cases also, if till he's confident that you can operate well. And if he's confident that you can operate well, he would allow you to operate sitting, sipping tea, even if the patient is paying 50,000 rupees for the surgery. So that is something which I learned. So the amount of emphasis he placed on the patient, if the surgeon is qualified, he operates. It doesn't matter what amount of money he's paying. So that is something which I learned from it. Other than that, principles of vascular surgery, principles of urology, principles of basic thoracic surgery, which is not taught in most general surgery residencies these days, is something which I learned. I saw him ligating a radial artery when there was an aneurysm, because he just palpated and had a handheld Doppler in his hand and saw that the ulnar artery was fine. And this case was referred to seen by many general surgeons who didn't know what to do. So things so simple as this is something I learned from him.
So ethically very, very strong, and at least from how they run the Learning General Surgery page, Learning General Surgery page, I'm sorry, it's very evident that they put a lot of focus on high quality learning. There's this quote that was up on the wall at CMAST, up until CMAST was around. I forget who it was from, but it said, "Practice does not make perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect."
Oh, absolutely.
And that was a very good point you made about supervised versus unsupervised learning. Unfortunately, not a lot of centers in our country are concerned with, I wouldn't say not concerned with, but there isn't a lot of emphasis on performing the procedure to a certain degree of satisfaction.
Exactly.
Surgical satisfaction, gentle tissue handling, good judicious use of energy sources, all of that, the small building blocks of good outcomes. And I think what happened with you is what has happened with a lot of us. You're exposed to a certain work culture for an extended period of time, and you get so used to it, you don't kind of entertain the possibility that there are other ways of working as well. So when you have a small change in institute, it kind of highlights maybe your own developmental inadequacies and some other things that may have been flying under the radar up until that point.
Yeah, I mean, if we, in fact, we say that there are many ways to skin a cat. I agree that. I agree upon that point, but we also justify our own errors by saying that our outcomes are good. Yeah. But that is also because of the fact that we have actually not seen good outcomes. So I mean, let's take pancreatic duodenectomy. There are a lot of centers which
I was thinking of the same example.
Yeah, there are a lot of centers which accept that wound infections are okay. There are a lot of centers in which they say that good outcome means the patient is alive at the end of 10 days. There are a lot of centers which accept that delayed gastric emptying is a part of a good outcome, but the textbooks don't.
Yep.
Delayed gastric emptying is a complication, and if we are not unhappy with the patient having delayed gastric emptying, you're never going to correct it. We can't simply escape by saying that, oh my God, you had such a major cancer. These are all things which you should be accepting. Same with pain management. We tend to tell our patients, Are Bapre, you had such a major surgery, thoda sa pain, it will always be there. We tend to tell our patients to bear the pain. And this is something which I've been seeing all my seniors practice. But we do not realize, I mean, once you start reading the basics of surgery, you will realize that pain has such a detrimental effect on wound healing and the entire spectrum of patient recovery. And giving proper pain control is a part of a duty of the surgeon. So if we accept that patient having pain is a part of a good outcome, you're never going to realize improve upon ourselves.
So would you say this newfound invigorated enthusiasm for getting as close to perfect as possible has helped you in your business ventures?
Oh, absolutely. I have had my team actually kind of hates me because they feel that, I mean, they do hate me. I mean, especially when I am working, because I've been quite a stickler for perfection. I tend to reject drafts which have errors where sentences do not have commas perfectly, sentences are not spaced perfectly. Um, and I always make sure that every question on our app is at least read by two different medical students who are very good in English. And I realized that my English is not so bad, but I also realize the fact that when you're typing 1,000 questions in a month, you do tend to make errors, factual, grammatical, and all that has an impact on the student who is using the app. The moment he sees a mistake, he's going to think that yes, this app is low quality. So that is something which I keep working upon. As I told you, we delay our package launches. We are not revenue oriented. We are quality oriented, and that has made our app relatively successful, I would say.
That's superb. You also, like you just mentioned right now, you have the questions vetted by medical students. How has been your experience with dealing people with more your age group? Uh, just having casual conversations and having a casual work culture with them versus the senior contributors to your app. You mentioned there were some heated exchanges and some egos. What's your workaround? Uh, do you let things pass? Do you get confrontational yourself?
Okay, so most of the major confrontations we have are with some of our students who demand what do you call? So Suprabha is texting me right now and saying that she deals with the ego brunts. It's not you who is dealing with the ego brunts. Yes, so some of our students are extremely abrasive and abusive, especially with regards to the revenue. Some they want discounts, sometimes massive discounts, which sometimes are not possible all the times. And they are sometimes very polite to me, but they are very nasty to Suprabha and the non-medical part of the team. Because we doctors have this feeling that we doctors are some unique kind, and that to surgeons. So Suprabha has to deal with a lot of nasty customers. When dealing with students, when dealing with the partners and the people we are working, I tend to choose people who are friends. So the amount of conflicts I have is quite less. But we do have conflicts with regards to policy decisions. And there are times when I have to take them out for dinner, have to make them explain, have long phone calls. So it does take a toll on my mental health at times, arguing with people who are friends, because it's very difficult to have business dealings with friends at some point of time, but it's also easier to make them understand. So I've generally tried to restrict all our student partners to friends and people whom I do know. With people who are not my friends, it has actually not been quite easy cycling. They tend to have extremely rigid demands, sometimes which are not possible because our team is small. They also tend to have unrealistic financial expectations because some specialties do not sell. You take specialties such as pediatric surgery, for example. If you have a question bank for pediatric surgery, we're not even going to sell 50 subscriptions a year. And for the amount of effort a person is going to put in, it simply is not going to be viable. They start with this thinking that they have done quite a good job, and they would have done a good job, and they expect undue financial rewards, which simply is not possible because the market simply is not big enough. But you take something like GI surgery or onco surgery, we're going to have 500 people subscribing, so it makes financial sense. So I think you need to take a lot of time to explain people to them that their specialty is not lucrative in terms of examinations, and that affects their ego quite a bit.
What's your take on the general examination scene right now? If you look at how residency slots are decided abroad, uh, there's usually an interview process. There's some back and forth that happens between candidates and institutes. And over here in our country, the student has the final part depending on what they are ranked. Do you think that leads to discord in surgical teams all over the country, where anyways egos are a little bloated, or maybe there's too much friction between personalities?
So, my opinion is going to be quite unpopular at this point of time, especially among with regards to the senior surgeons. But I have found that this system, there are a lot of errors in the examination pattern itself, but this system is unbiased, um, gives an opportunity for people from varied backgrounds to enter into surgical training, eliminates nepotism. Because in the UK and in the US, if you know the big guy, if you're a son of a big guy, if your father or mother has made a grant to the university, you are assured spots, and that is something which is an open secret. We have had scandals in the US. The single window system where it's all computerized as in India, where you have a mark, you get into the program, gives the opportunity to the lowest denominator, a person from a different background, a person who may not have adequate communication skills to start out, and and I think it's wonderful because it pushes them to the environment, and most people actually do thrive. I have seen my professors in Madras Medical College, some of the people who had taught me were from extremely underprivileged backgrounds. If there was no single window counseling system, if they had to depend on interviews as it was a few decades ago, even for MBBS, these are people who would have never entered into medical school. You take Professor Darwin in Chennai. This guy is from one of the most underprivileged backgrounds, from one of the most impoverished districts in Tamil Nadu. He's one of the best teachers of surgery in this part of the country. So these people would have never had the opportunity if we had people from a certain background, sorry to say, certain castes, certain religions. So the entire, your boss does not have an opportunity to select someone. And in our country, nepotism is inevitable.
Those
SR
are some
posts
great
are
points.
SR posts are completely filled due to nepotism. Agree with me or not? There's no
Would agree,
exam
yes.
to clear. Even in some of the best institutes in the country, all you need to do is know the director of the institute or know the department chief. And what a sad day it would be if the MCH posts or the MS posts were started to fill this way. Second thing, for a country like ours, salaries are not quite high. An MS postgraduate does not have quite a salary. You look at the US system, he has to apply to so many different places. Each of those applications costs money. Each time he has to fly to 20 different places, pay for the plane costs. I mean, it definitely is not friendly on the pocket. For a country like ours, and even in a Western nation, I would say that you would be able to eliminate biases. But we know that take for example neurosurgery. It is still a white male dominated field. There are very few women. There are very few people of color in specialties such as neurosurgery, general surgery. And I think that's quite sad. If they had a very equitable system, if they had affirmative action in that country, I think things would be better. I mean,
You
it's an unpopular
also,
opinion. A lot of people would disagree with me, but yeah.
I would actually say most people would agree with you given the dynamics of our country. I only ask that question because we get asked this a lot being in a major institute in JJ. Like, would it be better if you got to pick your team members? And I'm not exactly sure if it would be better. I think we would be getting more of the same, and we'd miss the Mavericks that come in ever so often.
Absolutely. I mean, it would, if you had to pick your team, it would turn into an echo chamber. These are people who would be echoing your opinions, and you would be thinking that, oh, everything is going great because everyone is agreeing with me. I mean, one political leader, I don't want to name him, he said that if everyone thinks the same way, better kill all of them. Just one of them needs to survive. So we should not aim to have an echo chamber. We should aim at diversity. We should have people in our team who are different in their thoughts. Yes, there should be a certain sort of common goal which they should achieve, but they should have different ways of approaching it, and that's when the team actually grows, because you have people from varied backgrounds. They might have different ideas, they might have a different perspective. And secondly, you being a very good teacher, I think even if a person you think is not qualified to enter your unit, as a teacher, it is your duty to bring him up to that level. A good teacher creates good surgeons. It is not just enough to identify certain people who are gifted naturally and make them good surgeons and claim credit for it.
That's
I mean, I would agree. I would, because working with GD Sharma taught me that GD Sharma would prefer people who have failed their DNP exams, people who are considered inferior in education and training, and try to mold them into better surgeons. And I think that's quite a noble thought. Instead of saying that, oh, this guy is a topper and I trained him, this guy would have made it big anyway, irrespective of whether you taught him or not.
That's fair. I'll have like one last residency exam related question before we veer back to your career choice. A lot of people are now viewing general surgery or gynecology or ENT as a stepping stone onto greener pastures. And much like we used to do in our junior college days, where in the 11th and 12th standard, we would, select colleges where attendance was not so much of a problem because you had to give your medicine entrance. I am now hearing stories of people selecting lighter hospitals with lesser clinical load so that they can prepare for their NEET or whatever exam it is that year, the flavor of the year, the entrance exam, and get to an MCH seat of their choice. And stories like that honestly really scare me.
Oh, absolutely. For me, that was never the aim. I always believed that you need to wet your hands quite a bit before you enter into super specialty training. And I entered into pediatric surgery specifically because I loved general surgery quite a bit. And I also loved pediatrics. I did pretty well in my pediatrics in the undergraduate days. So, and I love dealing with children. So, for me, it was a natural choice. And also the fact that I wanted to enter into pediatric surgery because I was interested in global surgery, and the fact that there is a huge shortage of pediatric surgeons if you look throughout the world. I'm not talking about Indian metros. I'm talking about places like Sub-Saharan Africa, West Africa, certain South American countries, Polynesia. But yes, it is quite a worrying trend. But this trend is restricted to people preparing for specialties such as neurosurgery, where they feel that general surgery experience can be discounted.
There's no transference of skill.
There's no transference of skill. For people aspiring for GI, onco, I still find that a lot of people want to get into the busier programs. This trend exists, but I wouldn't say it is as widespread as we think it is, as widespread as the seniors pointed out to be. There are a lot of highly motivated people. I mean, a lot of young residents. I do run counseling groups for young residents, first year PDs, and the fact is that they become uninterested because there are also very few people to teach them.
I think it starts a little before that, because the majority of these queries come in before they are selecting their MS hospitals, where people call, like they'll just kind of get someone's contact, they'll call and say, oh, by the way, how much time do you get in second and third year to study for NEET? What's the MCH conversion rate of that hospital?
MCH conversion rate. I mean, it's very crude, but yes, I mean, it sounds very horrible, but it is a very sad trend, and I don't think we should be encouraging that. I also do think that the MS final exam should be made into something like the MRCS Part B exam, where we are made to demonstrate a certain amount of skills, where you are asked to tie a knot, asked to do even maybe a laparoscopic knot. I mean, and as some of my friends point out, soft skills too. because
Hi, Suprabha. Thank you for this suggestion.
yeah. So soft skills is quite a. I mean, as we are dealing with people who are passed out of surgery, and I find that they're horribly lacking in soft skills. And I really don't know what their patients are going to do if they have them on their table. I mean, if a person, I believe that a person should be good at all times. There is no question of being nice to one person and not being. I don't think that you can. I find it quite difficult to switch personalities. And I feel that people who are not trained in soft skills during residency tend to fail miserably in real life. If not fail, they don't make for really good people. Uh, the older generation of surgeons, some of them had extremely good soft skills. But I also find that the older generation of surgeons could escape without soft skills because they had quite a monopoly in the various places where they practice. If you're practicing in a district and if you're the only surgeon, you don't need to have soft skills. A person with a perforation is not going to go elsewhere. But in this generation, you cannot have a good practice or be successful if you cannot be nice to your colleagues, if you cannot be nice to your patients, and if you cannot be nice to your juniors.
Or business partners.
Oh, yeah, business partners. Absolutely. You need to listen to their opinions. I mean, you would have noticed, for example, take a government medical college. You are working in a government medical college.
Yes.
We tend to admire and praise PGs who clear OPs quickly. We tend to clear the outpatient crowd quickly. If there are 200 patients waiting,
I actually have a different OCD. I judge them on the basis of what their full stop and comma placement is like.
Oh, what? Okay. But we have always been incentivized for clearing OPs quickly. We don't like the PG who takes his time to examine the patient and explains to the patient the problem. And these PGs are managed to see what, 10 patients an hour, when the apparently smarter PG managed to see 25 patients an hour. So that kind of a culture should change. We need to have an extreme emphasis on soft skills. We need to tell people that a consent means an actual consent.
Yeah.
We need to tell people that the consent should be gotten from the patient, not just from the attender. We need to make people understand that you have to explain complications to the patient. I find that a lot of PGs are quite anxious to do surgeries, and they tend to gloss over the complications when they have an hernia. I mean, what could be the maximum complication which could happen in a hernia? You need to tell that, okay, this complication may happen. In 95% of my cases, it does not happen. Most probably, you'll go back home, and most patients actually do agree if you take time to explain it to them. But I find that most residents, I have worked with residents as a PG and as an SR, as an assistant professor. I tend to find that a lot of PGs tend to write the consent and tell the nurse to get the consent. And I think that trend has to go away. We also need to stop penalizing our PGs for small errors which they make. This concept of making them tough should go off.
I couldn't agree with you more over there. The idea that a rigorous residency leads to hardened surgeons, like, I don't want that harder surgeon, man. I want a soft surgeon operating on me. I want someone who's taken their time to evaluate me, taking their time in surgery. You don't want a fast surgeon operating on you. Like, I wouldn't want it. And I don't think operative times should be a barometer for somebody's skills. So anytime in our OR, when we have a new consultant come in and they say, oh, that surgeon operated really quickly, I'll be like, so what?
It's the staff nurses issue. Staff nurses and anesthetists are to blame for this phenomenon. They tend to evaluate a surgeon merely on the amount of time it takes to do surgery, and I think that's pretty shameful. I mean,
I think we should instead change to how calm the person was at the end of a 9-hour procedure.
Oh,
that will be a better. Yeah. But just to add a small comment to that, I think there's a major difference that I have noted. The senior consultants who I've had the privilege of learning under and training from, even beyond the confines of a medical college, they always took it upon themselves to take patient consents, pre-op counseling, post-op. Like when a surgery has not gone too great, like they would go and speak to the family and the patient themselves and the recovery. As we have gone younger and younger, our priorities have kind of changed from patient-centric to our work list outcome-centric. So we don't land up devoting that much time to patient care as compared to senior consultants who develop those soft skills and who actually understand the importance. And I think somewhere this thing needs to break, where the guys who are fairly early in their careers, the assistant professors and so on, need to stand up and say, no, this is my job as well. I'm not going to delegate all the jobs and responsibilities down to the residents.
Absolutely. And one very important thing which I learned from Dr. G.D. Sharma and also my father with whom I work is the fact that you need to own up for your patients. You need to
Yeah.
be the advocate for your patients. Most of our patients are not from very economically well-off backgrounds. They do not know what is happening to them. Even if you do take time to explain to them, they do not understand all the aspects of what is happening to them. They merely trust you. So at this point of time, even in a government hospital, we need to be available for our patients, especially if things go wrong. For a herniaplasty which has gone smoothly, you don't need to give your phone number and lose your sleep. But if you have a bile duct injury where you have been the primary cause for the bile duct injury, it is your duty to give your phone number to the patient and make him feel that he is cared for. So,
Yeah.
so all the good surgeons I've ever worked with, if the patient calls them at night saying that there is something wrong after a bile duct injury or after a cystic duct leak or after a particularly nasty blowout, they would be the first person standing by the bedside of the patient even before the first on call resident comes. So this kind of work culture is something we need to imbibe because ultimately our profession is patient centric and that is something which we should not forget ever.
Absolutely. So for our audience, you may think that we have digressed quite a bit from the topic
Oh
at
yeah.
hand, but the reason why I'm trying to go in depth is because in conversations with Vinayak earlier, I kind of realized that somebody who is in resident education actually lands up spending a lot of time understanding what the problems of residents and what are the cultural shifts that are occurring, acutely over the past few years. So I would say Vinayak especially has a great finger on the pulse of what's going on and the about to pass outs or the fresh pass outs all over the country. And he's constantly engaging these guys in conversation. So as teaching faculty, maybe I don't have a lot of residents come and tell me what exactly is going on in the world out there, especially because I've decided to forego an MCH. But Vinayak knows what's happening out there. How are people prioritizing? And coming to prioritizing, my friend, how are you sitting and devoting or splitting your time between your practice, search test, and your home?
Okay. So majority of the work, I mean, I would say the Prime Minister's lockdown boded quite well for me.
Yeah.
The surgical work decreased tremendously, and I was actually between jobs. So when I was looking for a new job, this when the lockdown happened. So I didn't actively look for a job, but I had a reasonable amount of practice out in the private with my father and a couple of other surgeons in the city. Uh, so meeting deadlines was quite tough, especially when you had a pancreatic or duodenectomy, you were the first assistant that day, or especially if you are operating on a lab chole and if something goes wrong in the lab chole, it takes time. Uh, the first thing is the time component. And second problem would be the fact that you're always invested in your patients. Before the surgery, after your surgery, the amount of thinking you need to do about your patients is quite high. And when you're operating out in the private with no resident or no backup teams, it becomes quite difficult to completely make your free time as your free time because you are constantly thinking about what had we done wrong. Should I have evaluated the patient better? Should I have done this during the surgery? Or if the patient complains of pain, you want to be the first one to go back and make sure that the pain medication is given on time. So these are some of the problems which I face because I am very goal oriented with regards to search tests. So I would set certain targets. I need to complete 50 questions. I need to edit this much amount of work, and I would find that takes a huge hit. And that is when I started delegating a lot of work. I started delegating work to my friends, but I would always make sure that I was the final authority. When I was Gopi and I would take turns to make sure that we had the final call when before the questions were uploaded or before the particular video was being uploaded. But yes, it did take a huge toll on my personal life. And till I learned to start delegating work, I would say my family wasn't very happy with me. And so I'm gradually learning, I would say. But as I told before, I also learned how to stop wasting time. I managed to allocate time. I canceled my Amazon Prime subscription. I made sure that my Netflix subscription is being used by a lot of people, so I couldn't cancel it without their permission. But I made sure that I
That's your
deleted
charity for the month.
So I made sure that I deleted the Netflix app. And I made sure that Suprabha was handling most of the communications part. I mean, so this made sure that I had more time to concentrate on the academic aspect of search test, and also the fact that I was doing a lot of other kind of teaching for residents. So it was tough, and I would say I'm not the right person to answer this question because I don't think I've learned how to handle time really well.
Okay. All right. I think it's enough to say that see, surgical practice, I think for anyone is a very time intensive exercise by itself, right? It's not like we have 9 to 5 jobs. And what you were talking about with regards to thinking back to, is the patient going to be okay? What's going to happen to them overnight? There's a term that clinical psychologists use. It's called attention residue. It's when you're done with a task, but a part of it keeps occupying your attentional space for an extended period of time. And that's not very healthy. I feel very jealous for people who are in other streams who kind of just hang their worries and stresses at the door when they step in. That's not a great luxury that's available to us. But I can imagine there may be similar stressors even on the business side of things, right? Like what would you say is a bigger challenge? A startup or a surgical career in
To
its
be honest,
infancy?
my patients are more understanding than my students.
Okay.
But the surgeons don't understand the fact that your communication line is not going to be open at 11:30 p.m. in the night. If the official numbers WhatsApp message is not responded to, they end up calling me and they tell me that the app is not working. And sometimes during the initial parts of the app development phase, I tend to call my team, wake them up in the middle of the night at 2 a.m. and tell them that, oh, this work has to be done immediately. One customer is creating issues. I mean, every technical product will have certain glitches. It could not be, it could be, I mean, as simple as the fact that the person's internet connection was slow, and he's refusing to acknowledge the fact that his internet connection is just 2G and you can't play a high quality video with at 2G speeds.
But you still have to troubleshoot
Yeah,
the
we still
entire
have to
thing.
troubleshoot. We have to make him understand. We have to make him run the speed test on his phone or his computer and tell him that his Wi-Fi speed is low or his phone internet speed is low. I mean, we have had instances where the person has forgotten to switch on his internet and complaining that the app is not opening, and complaining that our WhatsApp messages are not going, when the fact that the WhatsApp messages was not being sent from his phone. There was no internet. And surgeons don't understand. Surgeons have bloated egos, and that is a fact which I have to deal with on a daily basis. It gets very frustrating, not just for me but for the entire team, and there is a lot of emotional burnout. So for a very long period of time, we stopped phone calls and we made it an exclusive WhatsApp number, so that we would not snap back at the person. Instead, take our time to compose ourselves and reply back peacefully. And there are a lot of people who tend to bypass the team. They would call up Suprabha and say, "I'm Vinayak's friend, so he has you give this thing to me free of cost." And people do it. People tend to do a lot of name dropping. But overall,
You're a
I would
popular guy,
say,
man.
huh?
You're a popular guy. Makes
Oh,
sense.
but the fact is that this is just 5% of my students. The 5% of my students, they take up a lot of time. But the fact is that some of the best people, the people who actually end up topping the exams, people who are some of our who spend a lot of time contributing to our app again, like they give us a lot of feedback, a lot of constructive feedback, are some of the most wonderful people I've ever dealt with. I've made a lot of new friendships, uh, and I've gained a lot from these relationships I made. Uh, and I'm very happy to say that we have sent a lot of people to UK over the last 2 years. We have had a lot of toppers, and 10 years down the line, I'm sure that these are the people who are going to be the who is who in all the webinars. So I'm very happy at the fact that I played a role in their development in creating better surgeons and better specialists. So it gives me a huge amount of satisfaction. And the other fact is that we are also diversifying our portfolio. We are entering into the MRCS exams, which I feel is much less stressful than the NEET super specialty.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So the people who are trying for MRCS, trying to move abroad, are essentially people who are cool about their jobs, people who want a easy lifestyle. And yes, they are much nicer to Suprabha. She's putting it on the chat to me. So I enjoy dealing with people who are preparing for MRCS than actually people who are preparing for NEET super specialty. Even though in terms of revenue, the MRCS is just a minuscule percentage of our revenue. But yes, we are trying to diversify more into that area.
So if any students are listening, please be nicer and more polite.
I mean, it's not just to me, but to the entire team.
Yeah,
but to the entire team.
Absolutely.
And people, I mean, people trying to make video calls to show their anger at 11 p.m. in the night. I mean, it really doesn't make you feel happy at the end of the day. So there are a lot of times when I've made a call. So we have an option where people can tell they are interested in this particular course. And if they are interested in the course, I make sure I call them up personally. And I have had second year general surgery residents shouting at me saying, "Who gave me your number? Who gave your number? My number to you?" And these are times when I've actually contemplated, why am I even doing this? I have enough patients who actually do respect me. But this is offset by the fact that there are 10 people calling me every week telling me that their exams went well because of me, or that 90% of questions in urology came from the search test question bank, or that they were able to top the exam, that the difference between rank 1 and rank 2 was because of the search test questions. So it is all offset by the fact we do face a lot of emotional challenges rather than technical challenges, to be honest, because surgeons are quite a difficult breed to deal with.
I think residents in my unit would agree with you a whole lot there. Okay, so Vinayak, I hope amongst the several viewers that we will have eventually on Facebook and YouTube, there will be a few budding entrepreneurs who will be thinking about starting off on something that is a little different from their surgical paths or their surgical careers. What advice do you have to give to them for this exploration?
So the biggest challenge for as an entrepreneur is managing mental health and the amount of pressure you need to deal with. So the most important fact is that you need to be prepared to handle these challenges. And the most important advice I would actually give people is to find friends to help you in this journey, because it is very difficult to deal with people who don't know you well, who don't know your quirks well, who don't understand you well. So if you have friends and family helping you out in such ventures, I think it's gonna be a great advantage. And you need to imbibe a certain amount of values in your work. You need to prioritize quality over quantity. You need to prioritize satisfaction over revenues. You need to be able to put yourself in what the customer wants rather than what you think that what is good for the student. So that is a challenge which many people tend to face. And I'm going to reiterate the fact that I think Search is going to be doing well for the next few years. But after the few years, I don't envision myself doing this line of work, because I feel that I'm going to be too outdated. This line being MCH preparation. Because right now I was involved in MCH preparation, and I feel that the core team being involved in the MCH preparation gives us a huge edge.
Absolutely.
And the fact that 4 or 5 years down the line is when we will start being irrelevant. Things are going to change. We are not going to be as focused on our customers' needs as possible, as much as we think we are going to be, unless we opt for a radical change in the team. And that is an eventuality which I am very much prepared to accept. And I have not made any. I'm not going to make any sort of financial commitments based on the income I'm going to make from this, because this is a very a volatile business. And just the way we displaced certain very established people and made ourselves the number one in this industry, I'm very well prepared for the fact that there are going to be people who are going to displace us at some point of time. When my professional commitments increase, when my family commitments increase, I may not be able to devote as much time as possible. So I am mentally prepared for that eventuality. So it is very important to realize that you're not invincible. If you have your highs, you're going to have your lows one day. So if you're going to work with that kind of an attitude, I think success is not going to be quite difficult.
That's superb, man. Great thoughts to end with. Thank you so much, Vinay, for sharing the entire journey with us. I'm pretty certain someone will take it as encouragement to go out and explore something that's been festering in their head or marinating for quite some time.
Thank you so much, everyone. There are a lot of few comments in the chat, Dr. Vivek Bindal, sir. It feels really good to help people and achieve their goals. So I think Ahem and I share a similar set of values with regards to education and the entire concept of surgical training. So it's been a great pleasure.
As does the entire AWRSC.
Oh, absolutely. You can't stop being an advocate for it. Yeah.
That is superb. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining in. We will see you guys soon.
Can I make in a comment?
Yeah, sir, absolutely, sir. Please.
Yeah, so I have been listening to whatever Vinayak has been saying for past 1 hour with keen observation, and he has been very truthful, and I think he has listed out the kind of challenges once you start an offbeat journey. I want to congratulate him, team, and the vision he has. I don't think so you're going to be obsolete. I think you'll have much more work to do, and we'll be contributors in increasing your work.
Absolutely.
So you need to just bring it out in the wider audience. You're going to be more experienced. So you don't. A person who is freshly preparing for MCH is never going to be better than you. You'll have an experience of last 5 years, and it is going to build up. So, and it may become your mainstream business rather than surgery. So there are a lot of downsides to surgery as well. I would like to congratulate you, and hopefully we'll work together in some time in future.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much, sir. I don't know if sir remembers, but I came to watch him operate about 2 years ago in Gangaram. He guided me through a robotic E-tip. This was 2 years ago. So even at that point of time, Vivek sir gave us a lot of direction about how to train in the US and how his education in the US was. I don't know if you remember, sir. I came with Dr. Venkatesh Mahadevan.
I absolutely remember you, and Vinayak, I have your number, but I never knew that you will become such a big man.
Oh, nice, nice.
I'll now come to learn from you.
No, absolutely not, sir. So I remember him motivating us quite a bit during surgery and during the lunch he sponsored for us, telling us about how he expects surgical training to be, and I realized that his value systems resonated quite a bit with me. So it means quite a lot, sir. The fact that you actually listen to this, taking time off, and the fact that you are praising me, because it means a lot, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
No, thanks. It was an enlightening moment.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bindal, for your comments. Vinayak, superb having you. Thank you once again. And we'll obviously be working more closely together next few months to years.
Oh, absolutely. We have quite a few quizzes to do, in fact.
Absolutely. One coming up next month. More on that later.
Thank you.
Perfect. Have a great weekend, everyone. Bye-bye.